Hey, hi. Full Crazy Town number 5, almost on time. Left off starting chapter 5. Chapter 5 is Hamilton 68 and remedies. This is the main thing about my book, solutions to the problem, not just me ranting and raving and waving my tiny fist saying, "Don't you know how serious this is?" Solutions. So we're going to get into it after we talk about Hamilton 68, chapter 5. What's Hamilton 68? Good question. I'm glad you asked. The Musk, Taibbi, Twitter, FBI files show that the crisis over the last 6 years are part of a campaign by the DHS, Democratic National Committee, FBI, and media to put and keep Americans in a state of constant fear, confusion, and desperation. Congressional hearings are revealing that a well crafted scheme to lie and to deceive about a scheme to lie and deceive citizens and to oppress and exploit them physically, mentally, economically, and spiritually. Matt Taibbi says the most shocking aspect of these revelations is the way the content moderators admitted that some things they wanted suppressed were true. They just didn't want Americans to know the truth, justice, or the American way. War is the best way to keep people in a constant state of anxiety. The Korean and Vietnam Wars were the U.S. efforts to assert its authority in Eastern Asia. The Red Menace was the problem, and military actions were the solution. However, these conflicts were widely panned as losses, even though our efforts were portrayed as noble. Then began a series of armed conflicts in Central and South America, Reagan's war on drugs and against communism, culminating in the Iran Contra scandal. The pattern is always the same, just a few infiltrators and advisors at first. The propaganda machine shifts into high gear. False flag incidents are reported, especially the ones about dead babies or raped women. Then the war drums sound the alarm. Troops are needed to restore democracy and freedom, which puts them in harm's way. And if one soldier is killed, then that's another reason for escalation. Proxy wars are the same. They creep into prominence, then a surge is needed when the going gets tough. Same with support for Israel. Beheaded babies and mass rape mean we must turn we must turn our heads away from genocide. Same with Kenya acting as agents for the occupation of Haiti. Americans grew tired of the senseless slaughter and endless corruption as embodied in the Iran Contra scandal. Clinton's legacy includes closing most factories in the Midwest, creating the Rust Belt, and massive unemployment. In 1992, the Bosnian War broke out, and the atrocities resulted in 2.2 million people displaced, over 100,000 killed before NATO went in to fight the Serbian army by repeatedly bombing Belgrade. The stage was set for the next big thing, 9/11. This event changed everything. The Department of Homeland Security was created as an umbrella over all other security agencies. Suddenly, we're back in action. We declared Afghanistan a terrorist state and invaded. Military recruitment hit an all time high. Young men and women seemed eager to start shooting, bombing, and blowing people away. In 2002, the New Yorker and Atlantic writer Jeff Goldberg said that Saddam Hussein played a role in the 9/11 attacks. Goldberg was an Israeli guard in a Gaza prison camp during the first Intifada, and he has served as an advisor to every administration since W. Bush, constantly pushing war propaganda. Saddam Hussein became the next target, and the security state machine cranked out enough lies to justify another invasion, including the famous dumping babies out of incubators story. This strategy worked so well that both parties began a death dance for more interventions. Wolfowitz, Cheney, Richard Pearl would tell a lie to the New York Times, who'd print it, and then they'd refer to the article to amplify the lie. My sense of empathy led me to develop a bleeding ulcer, which hospitalized me. Same thing happened as the COVID crisis began to be exposed. I felt abandoned by the government that was supposed to protect me. But just like past wars, the glitter and the glory quickly faded, and questions arose. What are we doing to these people? What if some other country did this to us? Veterans were returning maimed, traumatized, and suicidal. Obama campaigned on getting us out of Afghanistan, but then instigated a surge in U.S. troops. He teamed up with ISIS al Nusra in the Syrian civil war in 2013 after President Assad supposedly gassed his own people, stepping across Obama's line in the sand. Obama had all the evidence he needed to start a proxy war against Assad's troops. Then in 2018 came another faked attack that killed 34 people in Douma, Syria. It's true that 34 people were found dead with foam around their mouths, reportedly from sarin gas, but international inspectors found no trace of sarin gas. So the official story changed to chlorine gas, but that doesn't cause foaming. That got us in bed with radicalized militias, conflict with Russia, and the occupation of 1/3 of the country as we got the oil, as Trump later said, much to the consternation of the DNC, who referred to our efforts as saving democracy. Always. The tap opened further. Libya, Yemen, Somalia, where National Guard soldiers have been sent, and saber rattling in Taiwan. But then Trump signed a peace treaty and ended the Afghanistan war. After Biden was elected, the COVID crisis began in China and began to spread to Iran and then to Italy. By December, it was clear that a pandemic was looming, and it was predicted to be worse than the Spanish flu, so extreme measures were needed. The virus turned out to be no deadlier than a bad flu season. Trump was criticized for not initiating harsh measures to protect people against the transmission of the virus. He started Operation Warp Speed to rush a vaccine into production, but somehow the vaccine was not available until Biden took office. Dr. Fauci and other officials sounded dire warnings about the threats the pandemic would bring to anyone who was unvaccinated. It was as if martial law had been declared. Lockdowns, also known as house arrests, were ordered. Masks, social distancing, mandates, vaccine passports were required for nearly all transactions. Schools were closed. Small businesses were shut down and went bankrupt. People were told that they had to do whatever the government said, or else they would be responsible for mass murder. Your unvaccinated neighbor is trying to kill your grandma, it was reported. And the people obeyed. Many people became depressed and or suicidal, and many abused alcohol and other drugs, causing disease and deaths. After a year of enriching Big Pharma and the oligarchs, enthusiasm for everything Dr. Fauci said waned. As doubts rose about the necessity of extreme measures, a new threat was again required. The old Cold War standby, Russia and Putin. There seems to be no end to the disasters and impending dangers. The average American is left with no reason for optimism or hope. Those who are better off can afford to ignore the plight of others. The number of lies, admission of lies, and then more lies leaves the average American not knowing what to believe. Normal people need to be able to trust authority figures, and when we can't, anxiety, fear, and trauma result. We rightly see our world as chaotic, and we desperately search for something that will save us from these feelings of abandonment by those who are supposed to help us feel safe. Some people react by withdrawing from society. They become self centered, only concerned with family and close friends. They follow the advice of mainstream media, which says to just follow government regulations and recommendations and to not do your own research. Many podcasters talk about driving in America through cities and rural towns and seeing the same things: crumbling infrastructure, limited services, closed shops and stores, unhoused begging on the street corners, neglected neighborhoods, and a society in decline. They say the only people you can see on the roads are truck drivers and retirees in recreational vehicles. So most Americans have no idea how widespread these problems are. Myself, I cannot just turn off my brain, relax, and float downstream toward the deadly rapids. Many don't see the dangers of going along with dominant messages, but I do. And I'm desperate to at least shake my tiny fist at our established leaders. However, I don't want to be hospitalized again, so I exercise, eat good food, try to manage my stress. I put together an anti war form letter to be sent to Oregon's congresspeople as a small gesture against the war pigs. I hung out at the local Saturday market asking people if they were anti war and if they'd be willing to send a letter in a stamped envelope that I provided. Most people say they're against wars, but they don't see the US as being involved in Ukraine other than just helping Ukrainians repel Russia. Never mind that Jens Stoltenberg, president of NATO, admitted that Putin sees NATO as an existential threat. And that's why he crossed the border. Never mind that the New York Times reported that the real reason the US prodded Russia was to try and deplete their military, as we did in Afghanistan. After the Israeli war on Gaza broke out, I engaged in civil disobedience, defacing public property. I got some stickers and I put a sticker that said "the genocide" under the word "stop" on many, many stop signs. I stood on busy street corners, held up signs reading "Ceasefire, defund all wars, healthcare, not warfare, free Palestine," wearing the keffiyeh I bought when I worked in the UAE. Try as I might, I haven't been able to override the myth. I can win the debate, but I lose the arguments when people get defensive about my telling it like it is. They just yell, "Putin is evil," end of story, or STFU. That's even worse. This platitude, the Putin is evil platitude, is so much easier than to digest than lectures about the Maidan coup in 2014. Tens of thousands of Donbass citizens killed over an 8-year period. And they don't want to talk about neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian government or military. Same with Hamas. Much easier to equate Hamas with all Palestinians than to think about the massacre of thousands of women, children, and other non combatants in the Gaza Strip. It seems like people are desperate to change the subject when it comes to being complicit with our government's actions. As soon as I try to make a point, a phrase is lifted from my statements, and then those words are used to change the narrative. My concern goes unaddressed, and the speaker seems to think that I must listen and respond to their concern the way they didn't respond to mine. Every accusation of the Democrats is met with, but Trump. What's the remedy? Over the top humor, satire, making lemonade out of lemons. Fire those slings and arrows back. Make fun of everyone, including yourself. I call this self defecating humor. Get it? Music can be a powerful remedy. It soothes the savage beast, especially if it's uplifting and not depressing. My favorite quick remedy is the belly breath. Pooching out your stomach takes the pressure off your lungs so you can fill your lungs completely from the bottom to the top. Breathe in through the nose and try to completely fill the lungs, even if that means taking a last gasp through the mouth. Hold it for a few seconds, or as long as you can, and then completely exhale through the mouth, squeezing out the last bits of air. Repeat as necessary. The same in, nose, out, mouth method can be and should be used in zillions of situations. Feeling blue, you know what to do. Bored, climb aboard. When in doubt, breathe in and out. This can be done anytime. If you want, it's especially helpful when driving rush hour traffic or waiting in long lines. Another remedy, take one day at a time. Those of us who only be around for another decade or so take life one breath or one step at a time. Whatever you do, put yourself into it. Enjoy the experience just for the health of it while it lasts. Ram Dass said it best, be here now. I have what I think is a healthy routine at the end of each day. As I lay me down to sleep, I review the day. How'd it go? As planned? What could have been better? Are there lessons that needed to be learned? After the review, be here now. About 10 deep breaths usually do the trick. And then ponder the future. Am I ready for it? Do I need to do anything better to be prepared? No reason to overthink this one, but it's one of those hope for the best, prepare for the worst type of things. Another remedy, shake your tiny fist in the air. This is more of an act of frustration than anything else, but it has therapeutic benefits. In a large part, this book is just me trying to hold the establishment to account, which is better than not doing anything at all. Writing this book has also been an outlet for me. The way it was, nobody was listening to my concerns, and I really needed to get these thoughts out. Also, so many investigative journalists, independent media figures, and commentators were making so much sense. I wanted to write down their thoughts and words so I could be a better debater. My hope is that others will use this book to refer to when discussing the big ticket issues with their families, friends, and acquaintances. Then I came up with the big idea, reconnect over coffee. I'll explain how this might work towards the end of the book. In November 2021, I was frustrated beyond measure. It seemed to me that people who identified as Democrats had gone bonkers. All media, say Fox, seemed to agree with the Democrats, no matter what the topic was. I'd try to explain my suspicions about this propaganda to my daughter, and she'd clap her hands over her ears and say, God, Pop, where are you getting your information? She implied that I was only listening to Fox News, but I was checking out a myriad of outlets just to get a sampling of who thinks what and why. My isolation grew more and more daily. My wife and daughter told me I was paranoid and needed help, So I went into therapy, and all was going well until the proxy war broke out, and my therapist had Ukrainian relatives and scolded me for my anti war views. Therapist number two grew impatient with me. She kept suggesting outlets for my energies like get a job at the local community college teaching current events. I moved on to an online therapist who was nice enough, but then the sessions went from being free to costing 50 bucks a week. Now I just pour my heart and soul into writing this book and talking about it to anyone who'll listen. I was a regular Facebook poster, but then a frat brother called me saying he hadn't heard me on Facebook for a few years, which confirmed my suspicions I'd been shadow banned or otherwise marginalized. Another possible remedy: don't hate the haters. It's too exhausting. Focus on the issues, not personalities. When Trump was elected, I told my daughter I was so embarrassed to be an American. I just knew the rest of the world was laughing at us and wondering how we could be so duped. She was expressing extreme hatred towards him, but I cautioned her against that, saying, if someone can get you to hate them, they own you. She replied, I don't care. I hate him. Hate's a powerful emotion. It is cathartic to rage against the machine and machine like unfeeling bureaucrats. However, once again, if the powers that be can get you to focus on personalities and not policies, you're toast, derailed, sidetracked. You've marginalized yourself on purpose. No manipulation necessary. You've allowed someone to live rent free in your brain. Before the 2020 election, I said if Trump wins again, I'm moving to Canada. And I meant it. The embarrassment would have been too much to bear. However, since Joe's victory, it's clear to me that governmental policies are the same no matter who wins. Both parties are all in for all wars all the time. This sent me into a tailspin of despair, helplessness, hopelessness, and feelings of impending doom. Add on plans to make more cuts on Social Security, all in the name of controlling debt, and rising medical bankruptcies, and the stage is set for November 2024. Two parties pretending they're different. It's like another episode of Itchy and Scratchy Show. Fight, 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 fight. The Democrat and Repugnant Show. Chapter 6, Shake Your Tiny Fist. I used to go back and forth with friends on Facebook about these remedies and whether anything can slow down the circling of the drain as our country heads into the vortex of greed, corruption, bigotry, and war. Mainly, I caught flack for my doom and gloom mentality, especially since I wasn't offering any solutions. My family and friends think I'm a paranoid chicken little. They say, relax, you can't do anything about it, even if what you say is true. And that's kind of true. I came up with Reconnect Over Coffee after listening to several podcasters, professionals, and clinical psychiatrists. They say the remedy for trauma is to reestablish ties with those from whom we've become estranged. Exactly how this might be accomplished will be presented shortly. I get accused of nihilism, which is the rejection of religions and moral principles and the belief that life is meaningless. I do reject religions, but I don't think life is meaningless. And I'm all in for moral principles. Years ago, I followed the advice of Dr. Andrew Weil and I wrote an ethical will where I delineated my values and morals to family and friends. This led me to the ethics of Chris Hedges. His investigative reporting, commentaries, and view of American politics led me to write this book as I try to get the real world situations figured out and comprehensible. Anyway, Even if all I can do is shake my tiny fist in the air, I will. Still, in the name of all that's curious, I wonder how so many people fail to see what people like Jimmy Dore, Chris Hedges, Glenn Greenwald, Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal, and Lee Camp, Kit Cabello, RBN, and Sabrina Salvati see. These independent journalists, comedians, are so spot on, I just can't believe how others fail to see their value. I'm trying to find solutions toward that end. I'm trying to figure out what makes people tick. Our government has been sliding from a democracy into authoritarianism for quite a while now. And all I'm trying to do is give family and friends the gift that those free thinkers gave me. I notice that they always discuss both sides of every issue. Then they back up their opinions with evidence. Even after a while they started all saying the same things. They backed each other up. They came up with better ways of saying things, like switching from the phrase Trump broke brains to calling the condition the Trump derangement syndrome. It's been very therapeutic for me to listen to them and to write this book. It's been the only way for me to stay semi sane. Against all this resistance to change come the tiny fist shakers. If we're to have a nonviolent revolution, we need to find a way to crack the myth, to emphasize with the masses. Sabby Sab says mutual aid in our own community is the answer. Professor Richard Wolff says a workers' strike is needed. I think we need to do whatever we can to alleviate the crisis. I understand the finer points of conversation and debate. I know that arguing can be fun. It's a stimulating free for all, a testing, a give and take to see what someone's made of, and to test out your powers of persuasion. People have always People have ways to avoid the narrative or to poke holes in arguments. Mind you, good natured teasing, also known as taking the piss out of you, is a form of social bonding in face to face situations. As a teacher and a sub, I was always teaching conflict resolution and problem solving. So, when discussing arguing, it's important to look out for certain fouls. Number one, name calling, the classic way of redirecting the narrative. Basically, when someone tells you something you don't like, you respond with, yeah, well, you're a derogatory name. I can't believe you're so, another put down. Or when you say one thing, they just say something different, ignoring your statement altogether. Attack the person, not the problem. Number two, change the narrative by changing the focus. Issues are complex, but people can be reduced to a single statement they made that you don't agree with. For example, when Joe Rogan said ivermectin helped him recover from COVID, many people said he was just a misogynist based on something he said decades ago, apologized for, and the woman accepted his apology. And people then discounted everything that he ever said in the past, present, or future. He's damned for all time, and all statements from him are to be always condemned. What better way to condemn than to label him as an idiot who thinks horse paste can treat COVID? After a while, I noticed pundits didn't even have to say why they thought he was an idiot. They just said his name and chuckled, implying that everybody knows he's stupid. Number three, quote out of context. Don't like messy details, long narratives, or nuanced explanations? Pick one phrase or offhand remark, then refer to it as if it's representative of someone's life's work. Number four, obfuscate, confuse, ramble on, talk very slowly. Hell, if a debater tries to interject after a 2 or 3 minute drone-a-thon, That's the time for the droner to rise up with righteous indignation and say, "Don't you dare interrupt me." Now the narrative has been further hijacked into the "I have the right to my opinion too, you know." Besides gobbledygook, another great way to waste time when talking is to wave your hands all over the place all the time. Ah! Number 5, change the subject. Easiest, best, and blatantly aggressive way to win an argument. People who let their narrative get hijacked this way deserve to lose. You must vigilantly hold on to your point when you're trying to make a point. To wit, Jon Stewart was arguing with a senator about whether it's appropriate for drag queens to perform in front of kids. Jon immediately changed the subject to, "What's the biggest danger kids face?" Before his guest could respond, Jon said, "You know it's fucking guns." This rejoinder made perfect sense to Jon, and his guest couldn't get back to his subject due to Jon's not so skillful and expletive laden redirection. Also, there's a 7 category guide to evaluating arguments and judging the levels of ranting and raving. These 7 categories are frequency, volume, duration, tone, immediacy, intensity, and pitch. Jimmy Dore has a good philosophy when it comes to criticism and personal attacks. If you get attacked, that's because you've become a threat to someone. If that person is attacking you due to your beliefs and actions, that's a badge of honor. It's like Shakespeare said, "Sweet are the uses of adversities." In other words, the university of adversity. Here's another tiny fist shaker. Lee Camp recently posted his 10 reasons the US is the great Satan. We're not so much a rules based country promoting international order as we are a dangerous rogue nation, more like a mafia state. Number 1, on the UN resolution, food is a human right. Only the US and Israel voted against it. Number 2, the US did not ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Number 3, the US did not ratify the global ratifications of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Number 4, the US voted against the UN General Assembly resolution on combating the glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. Number 5, war crimes. Many in every war. And yes, other countries commit war crimes too. They need to be stopped, not justified. Number 6, Operation Gladio, an NATO CIA project after World War II, arming far right extremists to secretly battle and assassinate leftists and commies, especially in Italy. Number 7, the House voted 185 to 2 to blockade Cuba. Approximately 30% of the world's population is currently under US sanctions, which hurts civilians, not governments. Number 8, harboring and creating war criminals. The US does not recognize the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. Number 9, we torture, commit coups, assassinate. We invaded and bombed sovereign nations such as Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Number 10, US has almost 1,000 military bases and installations in almost every country on earth. Russia has 20. China has 1 in Djibouti. Sudan just announced that Russia will build a new military base on its coast, and this move is said to be the reason for the renewed fighting there between government forces and the former Janjaweed militants. Then Lee came up with 5 reasons that prove US empire is crumbling. Number 1, Israel's special genocidal operation. Number 2, U.S. State Department officials resigning in protest. Number 3, the propagandizing of U.S. citizens. Number 4, the decline of the American standards of living. And number 5, the U.S. losing the worldwide PR battle. Chapter 7, freak out, what to do? Get to the top of the pyramid, quick. Seems to me that most people are freaked out mainly by the lockdowns, the mandates, lost years of schooling, widespread financial ruin, calls to trust the science, the fear mongering, the hate spreading, the culture wars, the virtue signaling, the shrinking middle class, the divisiveness, the censorship, the propaganda, and the intense demonization of Trump, Putin, Hamas. Problem: most people don't know they're freaked out, and it's hard to convince, cajole, or nudge them out of their brain fog and towards a realization of their predicament. Most liberals need to admit that they were wrong, a very difficult thing to do. Comforting lies are much easier to absorb than unpleasant truths. How could this propaganda brainwashing have worked so easily? The old left used to be concerned with economic issues, poverty, economic mobility. However, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, capitalists didn't have to pretend to care about workers any longer. The 90s decade is called our peace dividend, when the Soviets were defeated and the 9/11 disaster hadn't hit yet. The guys from Due Dissidence refer to the success of the Jerry Seinfeld show, a show about nothing, occurring in the decade where nothing much happened. Jerry and Larry David were like Paul McCartney and John Lennon, Russell Dobler says, in that one was the craftsman and the other was the philosopher. This worked great for Jerry Larry because Jerry never had to express an opinion about anything. However, when the Palestinian genocide got going, suddenly everyone had to declare which side they were on. Jessica and Jerry Seinfeld brag about their support for Zionist organizations. They and others like Bill Ackman, billionaire Zionist activist, fund radical counter protests who attack protesters while the police watch. These goon squads use lead pipes and 2x4s to crack heads and draw blood like they did against the UCLA demonstrators, the pro Palestinian demonstrators. The World Trade Organization protests in Seattle failed to stop Clinton's plan to wipe out 30 million well paying jobs. He created the Rust Belt, and the social decline set in. Financial scams like the dot-com crash and the Enron banking crisis cost many jobs and tanked pensions. Same with the 2008 bank bailouts and recession. It's obvious to more and more people that our system is broken. Bankers and corporatists make big bucks when times are good, then they get bailed out when times are bad. The solution is not to try to correct them. We need to change the system. Tall task. It will probably take a general strike or some other mass movement to accomplish this. I'd like for this book to be used when discussing issues with myth-believing lefty lib friends. They can, people who buy my book can carry around it and refer to it when discussing topics. Plus, it's important to have real empathy towards the traumatized left, the ones who Nick Cruz on Revolutionary Blackout Network calls sweet summer childs. RBN's a great media outlet. The presenters always accurate and very amusing. They use simple, factual sentence to discuss all sides of every issue. They also call out the white guilt and white identity politics as the guiding forces behind much of the leftist activism. Tucker Carlson said, that George Floyd was on drugs when he was murdered, which seems to give his executioner an excuse to have used excessive force. He buys into the left right drama, which shows his subservience to the racist establishment. He focuses on the January 6th protesters as just exercising their free speech rights, but he ignores the rights and protests of Black and brown people. When he interviewed Putin, he pissed off the Democrats. That's all. Nick Cruz of RBN was in Kansas City during the George Floyd protests, and he saw white police tear gassing Black children who weren't part of the demonstrations. Fox, CNN, and other corporate media are bleeding viewers. The only ones who watch them anymore are boomers. Younger consumers, especially Gen Z, get their news from social media that they're not buying into the dominant narratives being spewed out by the Zionist imperialists. They're not falling for the myth of the American dream. So the oligarchs devise ways to get rid of social media sites like TikTok. All this will do is severely piss off the 170 million Americans who use social media, and they will, one, not vote for Biden, two, flock to the next site that lets them communicate with each other. After so many of them got laid off during the lockdowns or began working from their homes, they were reluctant to return to their dead end service and office jobs. Why should they bother if everything's too expensive, their jobs aren't offering chances for advancement? Media pundits extol low unemployment rate, but most new jobs are low wage, part time, and without benefits. Businesses need workers, and that's one reason immigrants are being allowed to flood into the country and into the workforce. Another reason, the armed forces are having problems meeting recruitment goals. Immigrants are more willing to accept low wage jobs and to serve in the military more than Gen Zers. Another reason, to show Blacks and veterans that the government will give debit cards to some immigrants as community and VA centers are converted into emergency houses for the undocumented people. Like comedian Cat Williams says, they're only doing this to show the ones who have been here for ages that the government can do anything it wants to or doesn't want to. There's a power shift happening from corporate to independent media. This is evident as ESPN, where Pat McAfee is kept on, even though his show continues to give the anti vaxxer Aaron Rodgers a platform. Mehdi Hassan was fired from MSNBC for his pro Palestinian views. He could get work as an independent media in an independent media outlet, but he made his bed and now he must lie in it. He's just like all the other young journalists who jump on the fast track to career advancement. They know what they have to say to get hired into the mainstream media without being explicitly told. They're ready, willing, and able to read the script that's handed to them by their producers. They want to be good entertainers to tell their audiences what they want to hear. They value the kind of artificial prestige that their jobs give them. If we want to debate these disillusioned souls, there are a few ground rules. No name calling, scolding, lecturing, or put downs. Good natured kidding, cajoling, and gentle teasing are okay, but this trauma healing is going to take a long time and it will be very difficult, if not impossible, to cure. Here's where gradual incrementalism and patience are most likely to work. Persistence and kindness are important attributes that should be behind every debate, every effort to reconnect. The rise of the woke movement, those who take offense at every slight and or insult, replaced the old anti-war left and allowed the corporations to deflect accountability by marrying this new NATO left, the ones who believe in the necessity of all military aggressions, with preaching about racism, misogyny, the environment, and bigotry. This virtue signaling is a new phenomenon, a new business, a scheme between our government and big tech to control all narratives by allowing people to declare loyalty to a group in exchange for not having to worry about doing anything other than criticizing those not in their group. It's an unprecedented effort to reframe reality and to quash pushback by any means necessary. The Democrats have managed to convince their voters that America is a force for good in the world, whereas the opposite is true. Still, people want to believe that their government is good and righteous, and officials lie to them about how good their world is. Many people will believe it, and they'll think that it's okay for the government and economists to lie to them as long as they say it's for their own good. June 17, 2016, Special FBI Agent Gelios and U.S. Attorney McQuaid hosted a gathering in response to the shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. Get this? FBI, U.S. agency in Florida after the Pulse nightclub. The conference addressed the conflicts and tensions arising from the differences of race, color, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, and disability. See, a basket of concerns, not just gay people getting plugged. The protections offered by the federal hate crime laws were also discussed. I find it interesting that the focus of the gathering was the conflicts and tensions arising from the differences between people, the differences of the 8 groups mentioned, not focusing on how to protect them all or how to fight hate speech. DEI, ESG ratings were tracked, individuals and companies were punished if they failed to measure up to the ever shifting requirements. You see that how it works? It's the those who determine what an offense is, what hate speech is. They're the ones who control all these 8 groups, and by extension, everybody who dares to say that no, economics, class war is more important than culture. How dare you speak out against my culture? Our government says we're a free democratic society and we want to spread our brand of democracy, but our political coups and military incursions around the world suggest otherwise. Most people are against wars, but they're hesitant to criticize our government. Why? Patriotism? A desire to appear strong and not weak? Because the Democrats saved us from Trump in 2020 and only they can save us again in 2024? The question has been eating at me ever since Obama's wars and Trump's surprise election. People are hungry for a cause, a purpose, meaning, identity. In this country, in the past, things like faith, patriotism, and identity used to fill the void, but now topics like we must stop divisiveness and hate speech come to bear. How to be safe during the pandemic is a major issue, and how to defeat Trump, how to beat Putin, how to make Israel safe seem to dominate. However, issues like affordable health care and other economic concerns impact more people in bigger ways. Most eligible voters get discouraged by the petty feuds on Capitol Hill, and then they get disgusted and they don't feel like voting. So the campaigns just focus on emotional issues. The big issues can't be resolved or even addressed because the Republicans focus on snowflakes and Democrats brag about rainbow stickers on missiles, and IDF soldiers wave rainbow flags over bombed out cities in Gaza. If Republicans want to focus on meritocracy, they should embrace MLK Jr.'s words about judging people based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Democrats would do well to return to their concern for the working class, but that would mean going against their values. They value the money they get from lobbyists and the power and the control. Maybe it's just a desire to be on the winning team, to be in with the in crowd. I can see why media wants to access the cool and trendy gang like Hollywood. If they can gain access to the power brokers, then they'll get big salaries and they can be rich and famous too. However, voters have nothing to gain by supporting these types other than bragging rights or the satisfaction of knowing they bet on the right horse. Plus, some people love to ridicule all those loser horses. I think most people are so traumatized they don't want to think about the cause of their misery. They, and me too, are just trying to make it through to the next day. The chaos seems to be everywhere and steadily increasing. Incidentally, I'm reading that book Chaos about the Manson murders and the FBI psyops surrounding Helter Skelter and acid crazed hippies killing everybody in Hollywood. It leads right up to Epstein and Diddy, right up to the very present. It's very interesting. As I try to alert my friends and family about the severity of pending totalitarianism, I'm constantly dismissed as a Debbie Downer, or a Putin Hamas apologist, or a conspiracy theorist, or just plain paranoid. My response: we should be debating issues, not personalities. We should be getting our questions answered without switching to a focus on semantics or canceling somebody because they said something that someone didn't like. We should not be billionaire apologists. Also, there's a double standard when it comes to free speech. Free speech for me, but not for thee, as it were. Cancel culture is a great example. I don't like what you're saying, so I'm using my free speech to stop yours. Feelings are more important than evidence or facts. Economic concerns are only a factor if you're low income. If you're doing all right financially, there's nothing much to argue about except cultural issues. So that's why so many liberals, mostly boomers, pounce on race and gender topics, especially the LGBTQIA plus push button, emotionally charged controversies. It comes down to virtue signaling among those who are easily offended. Any satire, questioning, or criticism is taken as hate speech and a threat to as a threat or domestic terrorism. It becomes okay to hate the haters, to brand those with whom you disagree as evil or stupid, a worthy victim to be censored and canceled and deplatformed. But if we live in a free society, shouldn't we have freedom of speech so long as we're not threatening bodily harm or inciting to violence? Problems creep in when the leaders of movements get co opted by the establishment. One example is the founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, Patrisse Cullors, who was involved in a lawsuit that accused her of misappropriating some $90 million in donations, buying 4 houses for family members, and hosting parties at a $6 million mansion paid for by BLM. When the leaders of the BLM movement spend more time infighting over the millions of donated dollars than solving problems, something's wrong. Nick Cruz says that the real leaders of the BLM movement were all suicided. That is, they were found dead with a gun in their hand and 2 bullet wounds, or they died in an accident. The leaders of St. Petersburg's Black Uhuru movement were arrested for sowing discord and domestic terrorism when they protested the Ukrainian proxy war. Other leaders seemed more interested in sowing discord amongst their peers and rivals than against the ruling class. Some women try to label all men as potential rapists and to treat them as if they're oozing toxic masculinity. I can see why they feel this way, but at the same time, I expect their criticisms to be individualized and backed by evidence. I'm going to let it ride there, getting dry mouthed and a sore back. But I'm going to try to blitz through this. I'd like to get through the later chapters aren't as long and wordy as the first 5 or 6. So I think I'm going to be able to get through it. I sure hope so. Hope you all can not vote for war pigs. Go to my website, fullcrazytown.com, to either order a book or to see the podcasts. Again, you can hear me rant and rave about my book for free, or spend it's less than $15, including shipping, to get the book sent to your place. So again, hope you're doing okay. This is a nice t-shirt from my time in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. Got some of my cool stuff up in the background. And I hope you all have a good week and stay safe. Bye now.